Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Stories of the Season of Stories. That is the three-part series that we are finishing up today. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in clothes and lying in a manger. How I wish I could do Linus's accent when I read that. This is the third in a three-part series, and perhaps what we're learning in this series is that by sharing our own story and finding elements that are similar to the stories around us, that we can arrive at a place of empathy and understanding, not only for others, but perhaps for our own story. We have talked about wonder. We've talked about faith. Now, what is all this wonder and faith about anyway? And why are we so compelled to look at it? Or maybe the better question is why is Reverend Penny so compelled to look at it? If we look at the events in our story, to looking at those things as far as wonder and faith, what really do we see ourselves striving for? What are the common denominators? What are we seeking? What does the Christmas story or the story of creation? And as I have mentioned to you, whatever story you are choosing to look at, to find a deeper meaning of your own personal story, what is it? And for me, as you know, it has been the story of Christmas. What makes that story so enduring? There are lots of theories. There's a lot of people have theories. Maybe it was just good marketing. Maybe they just had the right team behind them, above them, within them. Maybe it was political influence. I mean, the story really, when you take it apart, is relatively average. You know, it's a birth of a child born to a single mother, way young by today's standards, of course. And quite a story that she had to tell her betrothed. You know, a baby's birth that not only made quite a stir in the manger, but across the globe. No trust fund, no political connections, no big drama. Well, there probably was a little drama about that thing, having God's child. But it was a kid, a mom, a faithful father, some animals, a king or three, angels, big bright star. Not much different than the average birth, right? It was an average child. Is that possible? It was an average birth. Could that be true? Could it just be that all of the elements were average and can be found in our own story? But it was what it stirred in the hearts of not only the immediate family and all those present in the manger, but those across the desert, those across the globe. It was stirred at the prospect of knowing what God's perfection would look like in the form of man, of human. Because history shows us that that was not something that was average at that time, where we were beholding the divinity in ourselves. Knowing that God is all within us and around us. Somewhere between Nazareth and Bethlehem, an awakening in the hearts of not only that immediate family and those manger buddies, but also those that were aware and curious from way across the globe, from all walks of life. Open to all was this awakening, this new birth, if you will. Are there any parts in your personal story that you've ever experienced an awakening? Now, was there peace in that for you? Well, eventually. Because a lot of times in those awakenings that we have in our personal lives, I like to call it divine discontent. A lot of that going on as we're birthing this new consciousness in ourselves. But eventually, there's peace in it. The trick is to find peace in it when it still feels like chaos, right? And even if it meant change or the fear of the unknown, we allowed that awakening to happen in us. We birthed that new consciousness, that new awareness within us. You know, and it's interesting how we arrive at a place of peace as we move through that. I remember when I was a child, I was very disappointed that my grandma couldn't come to southern Wisconsin. I don't believe that. It was around the holidays, but I was so disappointed. And I am certain that this memory was stirred by a recent story that I heard. I so wanted my grandma to visit. You know, honestly, at 6 years old, I'm not even sure if I would recognize her because I hadn't really seen her that many times, but we'd been pen pals for a long time. And definitely soulmates forever. But I remember sobbing and crying. You know, that deep guttural pain, that of disappointment and that sadness that you just sob and you can't catch your breath and your jaw shatters and shivers and finally one big deep breath because you have to breathe and a sense of peace came over me. In that deep breath, what happened was, and I believe this is the same sense of what was going on in the manger. At least that's the story I'm going to tell. The whole scene became one of peace. What supports that? What happens in those moments when we feel ourselves move back to that center, that place of peace? What happens? What precipitates that? I believe it was when I remembered that she loved me, and she could love me from everywhere. I think that it perhaps was the first brush with an understanding of what unconditional love was. And my little 6-year-old soul got it. I was able to know peace in that sobby, messy time. And there will be and there is disappointment in our lives. There will be and there is hurt and there is anger and there is misunderstanding. You know, whatever the heavenly host of events that a human can create, we will experience that. And in each of those situations, my experience is this. When I remember that I am loved and that I am love, I arrive at a place of peace. That's what I notice. And as it turns out, that was exactly the message. The message, whether recorded by those folks that weren't even there, the message that was accurate or not, convoluted at times, causing a ruckus very often. The bottom line was the message, as the story goes, that this birth brought to us, that reminded us, was peace, was love. To love the divine expressing first, then to love one another as we love ourselves was the message. It is beyond the understanding of our humanness. It is beyond the messiness. It is beyond the noise and the stories that we tell. As Rumi says, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass. The world is so full, it is too full to talk about. Where do you see this in your story? Where do you recognize those moments where you remember what unconditional love is? Where in your story does that happen? When we recall the divine within us, when we recall the divine all around us, and when we remember the divinity in each other. Finding peace when you remember that, as Thomas Merton reminds us, love is our destiny. This is the story of the season. This is the gift that Jesus taught, that the Sufis teach, that the Buddhists teach, that Judaism teaches. All those masters and all of those that forget we are masters. We serve as examples, as did they, not exceptions. Love is our destiny. There is peace in remembering that. Love is our destiny. You know, every thought of frustration is like purchasing a ticket to more frustration, is what Wayne Dyer says. And as I was thinking through that, I read that in his book, Being in Balance. Great little book. It came to me that, yeah, every thought of frustration is purchasing a ticket to more frustration. And every thought of love is purchasing a ticket to more of that. Every thought of peace is purchasing a ticket to more of that. When we celebrate knowing intuitively that the story is really being told, this Christmas story is being told at a deeper level, we can consciously move toward purchasing that ticket of love, of peace. Love is what we are made of. Love is what we are made of. And it is in our thoughts, it is in our deeds, it is in our words, and it is in our actions that we express to the universe, I want more of that. What's your story? And where does unconditional love show up? And where does it express? In this season of stories, you have been invited in to wonder. Are you wondering, or are you wonder-filled? You've been invited into looking at fearless faith or blind faith, or both. And today we're talking about choosing that your story can be about love. You can find the element of love in your story and look at it and see it and recognize it in the Christmas story, in the story of creation, or as I've said earlier, in the story of Hansel and Gretel. It's there. We are made of love. Love is our destiny. And now we can choose consciously what that can look like, not only in this season, but every day of our lives. I choose love to be my story. I choose peace to be my story. And I get to write it. I am the expression of the divine. And so are you. And so are they. And so is it all an expression of the divine. Why not have love be the byline? is our destiny. Choosing love and knowing that peace is there. Happy holidays. Thank you, Spirit. Come on, 2021. Love is our destiny. Thank you, my friends. Love to you and yours in this season and in all the seasons of our lives. And now we will enjoy the music of Wiley Beveridge. He will be singing a Sue Riley song entitled, I Choose Love. Namaste.